I thought that would be it. That's not it. After the game, Dan Hurley gets a little mouthy with the Creighton fans. Now, keep in mind, UConn had never won at Creighton, period. And so Dan Hurley finally, this is the last building he had not won in the Big East. The fact that he felt compelled to do all this is wild to me. Nada, if you have B-roll to cue up here, we've got some local news coverage as well. We've also got sound. If you're watching right now and are unaware, Dan Hurley couldn't get out of here without. Two rings, Baldy. Let's go, baby. Okay, so that's 2 rings. If you're watching, we can roll this through a couple times. And then Nada, if you can B-roll after the one that I sent you earlier, because it's even before this, he's on the court talking, doing 2 rings, waving bye-bye. Listen, the man is a content machine. Dropping a 2 rings Baldy is a new one.
While being bald.
It does bring to mind.
Do you see the irony here?
Dan.
You're bald.
I mean, it makes it even funnier. And if you're watching, you can see Sports on 6. Credit to the local affiliate there. Creighton fans just giving it to Hurley. I love the fact that this is happening when UConn just fell out of the rankings for the first time in like 2.5 years. Folks defending, I agree. In the chat, folks are saying he's not completely bald.
He's saying
the bald community would agree.
You're bald.
I think, and I'm not in the bald community, so I'm not going to totally speak on behalf of the bald community. I might need a Larry David verdict to come in here, but now to play the press conference quote too. I think this is about a minute long. We've got even more from Dan Hurley after the game. He was obviously asked about it. He was willing to talk about it. If you got it, Nada, let's cue it up here.
What was that moment like when you got to turn to him and wave?
Well, I just wish there was more people still here. You know, that was the only thing, because when I've gotten my butt kicked in here, minus the COVID year, which we would all like to forget, where I think this was the only place we came to that actually had fans that year. You know, but I've obviously had to walk off unceremoniously, you know, just crushed by the crowd and, you know, cursed at and you know, but I don't really, as long as they're not leaning over the rail and getting in my face. I mean, I think it's what makes college sports so much better, or college basketball so much better than any other type of basketball is. You know, you got your, although the home fans here didn't get the win that they wanted, but they got a show. I mean, they got an intense game with, you know, with so much passion and a life or death struggle. You know, I'm not going to lie to you. I mean, that was very gratifying. I waved at some people, but I just wish that there was more of them still left. There's been a lot more left when I've lost, and did a good job of stopping me.
And that's how the press conference ends. Is there something wrong with me that I'm continually entertained by this? I get it. I get it. There are a lot of people that are going to hear the clip, see what he did, and their disdain for Dan Hurley is only going to increase. By the way, Baldies in the chat are rising up, saying Hurley is one of us. I understand the timing is not great. Parrish should be on the show to really address this matter. He's not here. I get you on that. The timing is not great. But again, GPs, if you're watching live on YouTube and checking in mid-show, Parrish is doing Sideline tonight on CBS Sports Network. So he's got production stuff and shoot around. So KB stepping in here. Kyle Boone, give me what you got on Dan Hurley's latest ep. It's every week with this guy. It's just incredible.
It does not get old, Norlander. It doesn't. Like I'm
get old. It's something. 2 rings Baldy goes into the pantheon. It's not on my board yet. It's going on the board. 2 rings Baldy.
It has to. Absolutely. Like I mean, I understand that people tire of Hurley's antics, and to some extent, I do too. Certainly, like the sideline antics and just maybe the way that he treats the officiating and all that stuff. Like I wrote a story about that earlier this season, but yeah, like it is fantastic. I mean, just him like asking like, oh, I wish there were more people here in the arena. They had more people here last year.
Well, and keep going, but it's a refresher. If you forgot, I think it was last season. Maybe it was 2 years ago, but I think it was last season where like there were people going at Hurley, and they lost, and Hurley went back at him and was basically like, keep your distance, don't mess with me kind of deal. So it got super testy. So there's been a backstory that has been building here. And at this point, UConn wins. A lot of people filter out, and they weren't as closely in his face the way that they had been. Keep going.
That's correct. Yeah, there's definitely some history there between UConn and Creighton, especially in that building. So, yeah, there's some pent up tension, some pent up frustration from Hurley being released last night. Felt good, I think, to get a win on the road, especially at Creighton. The building that has been very elusive for UConn, and for him to get a win there. And he was next to Liam McNeely in the postgame, kind of almost goaded McNeely into being like, talking about tough atmospheres to play in. And he was like, yeah, well, this was probably the toughest that I've played in this season. He's like, well, what about Texas? And McNeely's like, well, that wasn't really a tough place to play. So, but I thought that was great. But yeah, it was a great win for UConn, obviously, and Hurley, getting kind of the monkey off his back and talk your talk, man. You got to go and do it. You done it, and you get to relish in it as much as you want.
Give me Blue Jays, Huskies in the Big East tournament. These teams are now split. Creighton won at UConn on New Year's Eve, and so now they're split overall. And I want a third. I want a third matchup. Nada, can you? I got to hear Two Rings Baldy one more time. The audience, can you just play? I got to hear this one.
Two rings, Baldy.
I tell you what,
Kevin B in the chat.
Read it. Read what Kevin B just brought up here, because I had not considered this.
I did consider it, and I think it's a very plausible conspiracy theory we should at least throw out here. He says, is it a coincidence that we don't have GP here today, and an anonymous fan was told, 2 rings, Baldy? Any chance GP was in Omaha last night? Where was GP last night on Tuesday? Just saying. Makes you think.
My mind is blown. Parrish, where the hell were you last night?
He's got some things he needs to answer for.
Is it conceivable that Dan Hurley would approach Gary Parrish and say 2 rings, Baldy? I'm going to put the chances at above 0.
It's got to be at least above 0.
He claims he was in Lubbock. You tell me he can't be in Omaha last night in Lubbock this morning? I can get you a flight. I can find you a connection. I can get you a connection out of Dallas.
That said, UCLA played last night, right? So he was also coaching.
He was all over the place.
Well, he